Max Keiser here with the Keiser Report, standing in front of the Jacob Javits Center in the lower west side of Manhattan, home of the most spectacular political flameout of American history. She came to rejoice. She left in a body bag. Hillary Clinton, probably never to be heard from again. What was supposed to be a celebration turned into a funeral. Oh my God, what a catastrophe. Stacey.
Max, the voters came, they saw what Hillary Clinton stood for, and she died a political death, a quite gruesome one, almost as gruesome as the one she inflicted upon Gaddafi of Libya. Now, how did that death happen is everybody asking. How did this death happen for Hillary Clinton? And it's quite fitting, as we said, that it happened at the Jacob Javits Center. So I thought from the beginning, and we've covered it here on Keiser Report, that the fact that she had said, we came, we saw, he died about Gaddafi, and then cackled, that should have disqualified her from the very beginning. But right now, as we speak in America, there's a lot of finger pointing and there's little self-reflection from the Beltway media. They're pointing the fingers at everybody else but themselves.
Oh, exactly. I mean, those moments in Libya were horrifying. And Hillary Clinton seemed to think that they were amusing in some way. I think that scared a lot of people. Like, they don't want this person in the White House, in the Oval Office, to have their finger on the atomic weaponry because, quite frankly, she seemed deranged and unhinged. So we won't be seeing that anytime soon. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting is that the reason she chose this venue is because of the glass structure, the glass ceiling, and that there was going to be a fireworks display to symbolize, to be a metaphor for a woman breaking through the glass ceiling. This was overplayed. I don't think really voters came to put a woman into the White House. That could have been a factor 10, 15 years ago. I don't think that was really a factor this year.
I think it was sheer exhaustion from all of her wars. She proved she had the biggest cojones. She could kill as many people as possible. She could overthrow legitimate governments in Honduras and Ukraine, everywhere around the world, Syria, Libya, and she could do that, and everybody knew that, and they were like, you know what, we don't want that war. Another interesting thing is, while she did not concede here, and she conceded over there, she did the walk of shame down there, and she got there and she cried, and nobody showed her any mercy, just like they showed no mercy to Gaddafi. The fact that the Jacob Javits Center, as we had talked about the corruption, the symbol of corruption that it is, for me, looking forward, what happens to Hillary Clinton in this post-mortem situation of her political career is whether or not Goldman Sachs continues to pay her $400,000 for her speech, whether or not Saudi Arabia and Qatar decide to give them $1 million as a birthday gift, or $10 million or $25 million to the foundation. If they continue to do that, then we can say, well, maybe they aren't so corrupt, and maybe it wasn't pay for play, because the Clintons are done for politically. They don't have a political career going forward. She's not going to have the power to give them paybacks, kickbacks for any of their donations. So it will be interesting to see in the weeks and months coming up whether she continues to command.
Yeah, well, the Democratic Party has a real problem going forward because anytime they want to, the Republicans can whip out a subpoena and take her down to the court and charge her with something. She's got a laundry list of possibilities in terms of the criminal behavior. And so the Republicans that were completely written off 6 months ago, a year ago, they're on the ascent. They're moving on up. There's a new generation to embrace what was called Trumpism. Yesterday, that was a negative. Today, it's a positive.
Now, you and I had talked before the day of the election. Our program discussed the premium increases in the Obamacare rates. I think this had a lot to do with the outcome of the election, because in North Carolina, premiums increased by an average of 40%. In Pennsylvania, which Trump also won, the premiums increased by an average of 54%. They increased by an average of 120% in Arizona. He won all of those states. And I want to look at another map and some figures and data about the exit polls of who actually voted for Trump, who voted for Hillary Clinton. And from the New York Times, they have a map where there is less competition among health insurance companies. And you see the vast ways, all the bits of the country that Trump won, they basically only have one provider in the healthcare market going forward. Obviously, Paul Ryan has already come out and said they're going to get rid of Obamacare immediately, straight away. But this is part of what the voters were facing on the ground The Beltway media decided to ignore it, but the fact is, if you look at the results, just a reminder that the poorest in America backed Clinton over Trump. So anybody earning under $49,000, by and large, went for Hillary. Anybody over that, especially the number one percentage in terms of income that went to Trump, was between $50,000 and $99,000. And I said that this would be, in particular, that the wage group, the income group, that would vote for Trump. Because why? They are the ones paying the full premium increase. They don't get any of those subsidies that Obama was like, don't worry, you get subsidies. Those are the people that were paying the subsidies, and they were angry, I think.
Right, you mentioned the Beltway media there. I think during our shows here covering this election and our travels around America, what we discovered was once you leave the bubble of the Washington, D.C., the mainstream media, the New York media, and you talk to people in North Carolina, in Florida, their support for Trump was quite overwhelming. And we saw that in the polls. It's amazing that outlets like CNBC, CNN, and others apparently never went out there beyond the Beltway to actually talk to people what they might be doing. I mean, it was amazing to me that if you did, you would have gotten a completely different picture and you would not be shocked by the results.
And, you know, by the way, this is also all the Beltway media and the liberal and the neoliberal sort of pushers. One of the arguments they had is like, for Obama, let's be realistic, Democratic voters. Just be realistic. You know, we can't have Medicare for all. We need this crazy, mushed together, corporate written project of Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. And this has ended up destroying the whole party over this Affordable Care Act when they should have just expanded Medicare. You and I have experienced that with your mother, as everybody knows, we've been in North Carolina. You're on Medicare. It's easy as peasy. When you're on these insurance things, you're going to networks, you got to be in network, you got to get permission to go to a specific doctor, to get a specific treatment. Medicare, you don't have that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the basically the abdication of common sense policies in favor of big data, algorithmic trading, and let the robots figure it out. And nobody's actually looking at the stuff from the point of view of what makes sense. And so, for that reason, the people behind Hillary were looking at their data. They were looking at the polls. They were looking at prediction markets. They didn't actually talk to real people and ask them how they were voting. And the result was catastrophic failure. In the case of healthcare, we knew the second that the Obamacare was rolled out and all the healthcare stocks went up dramatically, that this was going to be another bailout of the healthcare industry, another bailout for Wall Street, another bailout for corporate America, would absolutely do nothing for solving the problem of affordable healthcare in America. So people, as you point out, in that demographic group, in that income bracket, they don't want to pay the extra money. They get that bill. It's a tax, obviously. That was a lie to say that it wasn't a tax. This was an unconstitutional tax imposed by a lot of people in America, and they rejected it because no taxation without representation. They said, you know what, let's get a different representative in the White House because we don't want to pay this tax. This is draconian. This is rapacious. This is not constitutional, and I reject it. Hillary, go away.
Well, she is going away. And you mentioned the polls there. I want to point out that one of the remarkable things about the polls was, for example, Trump won Wisconsin, which a Republican has not won for decades. And all the polls, every single poll for the last year has shown that Hillary was going to win it by 6 points. It said she lost it by that much. So the polls were wrong, just like they were with Brexit. When Trump, one of the first things he said as he crossed the floor of the Hilton was to an ITV presenter. He said, this is Brexit 2.0. So it's quite fitting that the day after we get British-like weather. I also want to say, here's some interesting facts from the real Banksy. And there are a lot of real Banksies on Twitter, but this is one of them. So Republicans control the Senate, House, majority of governors, Supreme Court pick, presidency. This has not happened since 1928. Max, what happened in 1929?
Right, you had the crash shortly thereafter, and you have possibility of overcooked stock market. We've already seen the market take a huge leap, which shows that money is going to start flowing back into the economy and into these markets in an inflationary way. Bond market looks like it's rolling over now. We're going to see the stock market, maybe the property market, benefit from a resurgence of inflation. All that money that was on the banks, central banks' balance sheets is going to be basically leached back into the global economy, which is going to send prices a lot higher. If Trump makes good on his promises for immigration and trade barriers, that means wages are going to go higher. That sets up an inflationary spiral. So, yeah, I think the deflationary period we've been talking about for years now is over. We're entering into a neo-inflationary period.
neo-inflationary. But I want to ask as well is the markets were going to crash. They are going to crash because they're at all-time highs. They're at the bubble peaks again. So they were going to crash no matter who became president. But the question is, Hillary Clinton received over $100 million from Wall Street. Trump's campaign received less than $2 million. So when these markets crash, if it crashes in yet another 2008 style crash or a 1929 style crash, is he going to bail them out? Probably, perhaps not. Perhaps he might do what Obama should have done and what he kind of promised when he was doing that hope and change thing, that it would actually be more like QE for the people or help the people or infrastructure projects or things like that.
Well, absolutely. He has talked about infrastructure projects, and so those stocks are responding. Caterpillar and others are moving up sharply. A big rotation into those types of stocks, and we're seeing that play out. But I'm not so certain that we're going to see a crash before we see maybe even a manic melt up. As you do see in eras like the late 1920s, when you had absolute power given to Calvin Coolidge and his crew that were doing all the same games at that time. Wall Street is pumped, and they've got trillions, and they've got leverage. They're going to deregulate the markets. They're going to repeal some of the regulations that were brought in after the crash of 2008. Dodd-Frank will probably be repealed. So you're going to have less regulation on Wall Street. You're going to have more leverage. You're going to have more speculation before you get the comeuppance.
So quickly, if I could get to this, Donald Trump is moving to the White House and liberals put him there. This is from Thomas Frank. He wrote What's the Matter with Kansas? Because remember, back in the Bush era, it was the hubris of the right wing, but everybody asked, what's the matter with Kansas? He asked that question and he found what was wrong with conservatives. Here he's looking at what liberals have done to cause this, with the Beltway media in particular, and he says that Clinton supporters among the media didn't help. It always struck me as strange that such an unpopular candidate enjoyed such robust and unanimous endorsements from the editorial and opinion pages of the nation's paper, but it was the quality of the media's enthusiasm that really harmed her, with the same arguments repeated over and over 2 or 3 times a day, with nuance and contrary views all deleted. The act of opening the newspaper started to feel like tuning into a Cold War propaganda station, which was so weird to see them lobbing that charge at everybody else. Propaganda, interference. And when they were the ones pushing it so wildly. So, they aren't looking at themselves yet. We're going to look at the next few weeks and see if they do.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Muammar Gaddafi from somewhere is laughing at Hillary Clinton. Oh, karma's a B word. Anyway, this isn't really London-like weather. This is more like tears of a liberal. Don't go away. Much more coming your way. Stay right there. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Dr. Michael Hudson. Dr. Michael Hudson, welcome back.
Good to be here, Max.
All right, so you're the author of many books, including Killing the Host, which is my favorite, talking about banks, parasitical banks, etc. But welcome to Trumplandia.
Well, it's better to be here than the alternative.
What the alternative being Hillary hell?
That's what it would look like.
What's the top contrast between Trump and Hillary, do you think?
Well, for a lot of people, it was that Hillary wanted to be very confrontational to Russia. You saw what she did in Libya. She destroyed one of the most prosperous societies in Africa, turned the arms over to al-Nusra, moved into Iraq, moved into Syria, and announced 3 times in the last 2 weeks that she was willing to shoot down Russian planes in order to have a no-fly zone there. So basically, what she was threatening was brinkmanship, and voters saw that, and they didn't think it was worth it. They wanted to throw out the neocons. So it was not only a vote against Obama and Wall Street, it was a vote against the neocons that Obama and Hillary had brought into office.
Right now, interesting that she had all the assets to work with, the celebrities. She had all the Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, Wall Street money, unlimited money, $1 billion worth of money. She had it all, and yet she lost. Trump was really...
That's why she lost.
Talk about it.
Well, people saw who's backing Hillary, and they saw Wall Street's backing Hillary, and they're not backing Trump. The corporations are backing Hillary. The neocons are backing Hillary. The Russia bashers and the people who want to go to war in the Near East are backing Hillary. Those are the people we don't want. There has to be an alternative. So the election was basically about the lesser of 2 evils. And Hillary's position was, I'm not Donald Trump. But Donald's position was, I'm not Hillary, and that won the election for him.
Wow. Now, states like Michigan and the Rust Belt, the Blue Wall, up there in the north and the Rust Belt, they went for Trump. They're hoping to get some jobs back out of all this, based on what he's been talking about. Do they have reason for hope?
I think so. Certainly, according to what he said, we don't know what policies he's going to do, and we don't even know who his cabinet's going to be. I guess the only hope for jobs that they have at the top of the list is infrastructure. And there are two ways of doing infrastructure. If it would have been Hillary, who also spoke about infrastructure, she'd do it privatization style. She'd do it, give it to Wall Street, give a cost plus, and if you give a cost plus contract to infrastructure companies, they're going to maximize the cost. But if
what we've seen in the defense business for years, the famous $800 hammer, that's exactly the cost plus legacy of you throw it over to these guys, and the government has unlimited funds, essentially. They're not accountable on the P&L basis, a profit and loss basis, like a regular business. So they get gouged. This is the story of Obamacare, essentially, isn't it?
Exactly right. Now, Trump has a chance to do essentially the public option for infrastructure. If the government does it, the government can do it without having to charge interest and dividends and stock options and all of the costs the private enterprise builds in. He can avoid following the Margaret Thatcher route. And already
of privatization.
Privatization.
Okay, of using borrowed money from private banks and getting charged through the nose.
That's
you can
right.
simply have the government fund these things at no cost money, and the public option, as you call it. But wait a minute. Paul Krugman is against Trump. Shouldn't Paul Krugman be loving Trump?
No, Paul Krugman is a neocon and basically a neoliberal. It was Bernie Sanders who yesterday made a public statement that we're willing to work with Trump to help him do the infrastructure in our way. And his economists are the University of Missouri at Kansas City people, Stephanie Kelton, Bill Black, Randy Ray sometimes, and they are quite happy to work with Trump to say, look, we can show you how to fund it at the government spending without being in debt to Wall Street, without giving huge giveaways. So Trump has a chance to work with the most progressive groups, with the Sanders people, who were really, I think, his major support. And the people who voted for Sanders in Michigan and elsewhere, they're the people who threw the election to Trump over Hillary.
Well, of all the politicians that Trump insulted along the way, he was least insulting toward Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, because they were saying going for the same audience. That's why he didn't want to debate Bernie Sanders last spring. He said, "Wait a minute, if I debate him, I'll build him up. I can't beat him, but all the polls show I can beat Hillary. Hillary's the lady I want to run against."
Yeah. So the MMT, which is what is it stand?
Modern monetary theory.
Modern monetary theory, right? So you talk about Bill Black, yourself, Stephanie Kelton, the School of Economics down there in Kansas City, Kansas, right? Kansas School.
No, Missouri. Kansas City, Missouri.
Kansas City, Missouri.
You've been away from America too long.
Yeah, so you guys have been cooking this up for years. Is this are you going to come into the sun finally? This is your time.
If history works the right way, it's our time. We don't know what Trump's going to do, but at least we're holding out an olive branch to him and say, look, just like you're against Obamacare, and in your first speech, Mr. Trump said, a public option was the best form of medical care when he was opposing Obamacare. That was his first Republican debate. And I think down deep he believes it. I think his instincts are very good. The question is whether he's going to go with what used to be his instincts or whether he doesn't have any instincts and just wants to be approved and let the Republican leadership, who he defeated, write his program. We don't have a clue.
Wait a minute. Kansas City is in Missouri?
Yes. There's also a Kansas City in Kansas, but the University of Missouri at Kansas City.
So this is why when I see Bill Black all the time,
UMKC.
I always make a Charlie Parker reference. I like Kansas City, Charlie Parker, the sound of jazz of Kansas City, and he always looks at me like, what the hell are you talking about? I guess this is why. I got the wrong state.
No.
I'm completely crazy. Okay, let's move on. So exit polls showed that 65% of voters thought that trade takes jobs away. Is that correct?
what they really mean is the trade agreement, the way it's written, takes jobs away. And it's not that the trade takes jobs away, it's that the immigration from Mexico that began under Carter, really, was designed to help break the labor unions, to help lower wages. So obviously, if you have a million now Ukrainians and Polish and Arabs coming into Europe, that's going to force down. But what really takes jobs away is the corporate agreement.
Okay, let me rephrase that. So in other words, exit polls show 65% of voters thought that trade deals, bad trade deals, take jobs away. And your answer would be?
This trade deal would have been a disaster. The TPP is a disaster.
Trump's against it.
Yeah.
Hillary's for it. She says she's against it, but she's for it.
That's right.
Canada just came out that Canada is part of NAFTA, and they're now willing to renegotiate NAFTA. They've sent out the signal to the Trump White House saying we're ready to re-talk. I mean, the NAFTA is, I believe, in your opinion, also a very problematic trade deal.
Well, it certainly was always bad for Canada. All the deals that America's made with Canada have been bad for Canada, starting with the auto parts deal way back in the 60s. So yes, these were bad deals, and the worst thing is that NAFTA destroyed Mexican agriculture, that it flooded Mexico with low-price American farm exports, and that really undercut Mexico's ability to feed itself. And now the Mexicans found out that free trade in agriculture prevents countries from feeding themselves and opens the floodgates to subsidized American exports. And under these so-called free trade deals, they really mean America gets to subsidize its industry by grandfathering in all the subsidies and the protectionism and the quotas we have, but other countries can't protect theirs. It's a double standard.
Does America do to Mexico what China does to America?
It's different. Not really, because the imports from Mexico are really from the maquiladoras, the little sweatshops that are all put right along the Mexican border, not for the Mexican economy as a whole. And these are sweatshops really run by American firms. That's not the same as what China's doing at all.
But is it slightly hypocritical? Because, in other words, America's now Trump's going to go after China, and he's going to castigate them, call them a currency manipulator. They don't like what's happening with China. China's undercutting the U.S. market. They've got the currency peg. And so how is that going to go, do you think?
It's not going to go anywhere. There's no way that China can be considered a manipulator by the International Monetary Fund or by any international organization. Producing efficiently at a low cost is not manipulating your currency. In fact, China's been opening up its capital controls and letting capital flow out of China into other countries. So there's no way that
China... their currency.
No,
they peg it.
It's been going. They're gradually letting the capital flow out of China, and that's why the currency is going down. They're unpegging it.
Yeah, but over the last 20 years now, they've been trying to artificially keep it high.
Well, how have they done this? They've done this by recycling the dollars that go into China into American Treasury bills, and now they're saying, wait a minute, we don't want to peg the currency this way. If pegging the currency means that we buy U.S. Treasury bills to finance the deficit that's spent on military spending, and then the military spending is encircling us, we don't want this anymore. We don't want to have to do this.
Okay, well, let me stick on China for a second, because in other words, you're saying they can't revisit the China relationship because it's based purely on the mechanics of sound trade at the moment, and that's not going to change?
No, there are too many vested interests at stake, and there's no way that you can...
Whose interest at stake?
Well, the American investors in China, for one thing. If America breaks international law by making unilateral tariffs on China, China says, okay, we'll just take over the American... first of all, this means that the factories that are exporting to the United States, to Walmart primarily, are going to go bust. They'll go way down in value.
That's right.
China will say, thank you, we will now buy them out. And China will take control of the American-controlled industry there. China would love Trump to try to make this war on China because that would drive down the price of American export investments in China. China could buy them out and regain its control over its own factories and resources.
I'm not convinced by your argument. We're going to revisit that. But let me just ask you kind of a side question about Apple Computer, because Apple Computer is a company that keeps hundreds of billions of dollars offshore. And it's part of the problem of the American manufacturing industry is that those jobs could be in America. Can Trump will he be in a position to go to Apple and say either bring that money onshore, or we're going to put a tariff, or you got to open a factory? In other words, he can play hardball with China, with the Apple computer. Do you think that is a possibility?
I think here's more likely the deal he'd make with Apple. He'd say, look, I will let you bring all this money that you've been avoiding taxes in America. You can bring it all in and pay only a 15% tax rate, as low as you pay in Ireland. You get to bring it all back to America. But you have to spend some of that here on factories. Apple would pick it up in a minute. It would say, my God, here now we get to have evaded taxes for the last 10 years. We've got to bring all this money in. Sure, it's worthwhile building up stuff here. It's a win-win.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to pick it up in another segment. Thanks for being on today.
Good to be here.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Michael Hudson. Find us on Twitter at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.